So I'll just ask my questions according to the sequence of presentation. So the first one is Mr. Ching. You mentioned that there were actually two kinetic models that were fitting your data. Tama ba?
Sir, three po.
Tatlo.
Yes.
Yung kinetic models na nag-fit. Based on these kinetic models, what's the rate determining step in the dehydration of moisture from the leaves that you study?
The rate determining step. For the rate determining step, because in drying po, there are two main stages involved. First is the constant rain period, and second is the falling rain period /S. So it can be multiple falling rain periods. In our study, we observed po na there's no constant rain period. And constant rain period po kasi, it's constant because ang nangyari ng po dun is, yung surface moisture sa solid is nag-evaporate lang, kaya constant siya. And it is externally controlled, so it is mainly affected by our drying variables like temperature and air velocity. However, with the lack of constant rain period, it suggests that the drying mechanism on all the leaves are controlled by internal mechanisms. So, for example, in our insulin, bakit ang tagal niyang mag-dry compared to panapain sampong? So, most likely, kasi yung internal structure niya, mas konti yung butas, mas maliliit yung butas, yung pores, tapos mas mahahaba yung length, yung mas crooked yung length, yung tortuosity, mas mataas. Kaya mas matagal siya mag-dry. And that could be the reason na internal controlling po talaga yung process, and it is determined by the internal structure of it.
Yeah, I think you gave a very good answer. Your models are actually describing diffusion, moisture diffusion. And there are two regimes. You have yung mass transfer boundary layer diffusion, which is outside of the leaves, and the internal diffusion. And because you do not see any connection between the flow rate of the air and the rate of dehydration, that means yung mass transfer boundary layer is not the rate determining step. Okay. How did you measure the activation energy? How did you calculate?
We calculated it. See, they are in this equation.
Yes, but you need to use a rate, and you have different rates. So did you measure did you calculate the activation energy using the initial dehydration rate or the dehydration rate at any given percentage dehydration?
For the activation energy, we used po, I believe we used po an average value. Kasi po, the data that we have is a constant progression of moisture versus time. So it was calculated, but we cannot use the full data. So we have to take average values.
If you do the calculation based on percentage moisture dehydration, the rate at which that is occurring, you will find out that the delta E is also going to be increasing as you increase your moisture dehydration, and that would support your indication that it's an internal mechanism. Thank you very much. Now let me ask Mr. Sia. Medyo related sa question ni Dr. Bill yung question ko. The walls, they were modeled as plastic or rigid in the simulation.
So, plastic po.
So they are modeled as plastic.
Yeah, the plastic behavior of the wall after initial cracking, it's captured in the numerical analysis.
Okay. So would that mean that the practice of some scrupulous constructors, in which they fill the hollow blocks with either paper or just actually either paper or sand, hindi concrete yung nilalagay sa loob para pag lalagay nila ng paper or sand, para pag yung next layer ilalagay mo na may pagpapatungan yung concrete. So based on your model, you doing that and using a 4-inch CHB is a better practice, tama ba?
Well, there are many factors that affect the structural capacity of the building. And, well, for my study, I considered a CHB that was filled with mortar.
Mhm.
So, if yung paper, kung alternative materials na yung ginagamit, the behavior may change, but the concrete hollow blocks may still induce some form of restraint on the adjacent columns, and it can still be possible that the short column effect may be induced. So definitely, further studies are definitely required to better really understand the interaction between walls and members, especially since it is really one of the most common type of construction in the country.
Okay. Pero non-load bearing naman siya doon sa calculations mo. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so to Engineer Consulat,
Yes, sir.
you presented 3 fermentation models, tama ba?
Yes, the cell biomass, the substrate, and the product model.
What do they phenomenologically mean?
Okay. So these 3 models will illustrate the dynamic behavior of the fermentation process. What do we mean when we say dynamic behavior? So what will be the progress of the fermentation process at any instant? Why did I model the fermentation process? For what purpose? Because these 3 kinetic models, given any simulated data or random data of X, S, and T, I can calculate the P. What is the P? The ethanol yield. So even the industry could benefit this because, for instance, like they will say, okay, we will have this batch, this amount of yeast, this amount of molasses, this fermentation time. Real time, they will have the ethanol yield. And that is the essence or the significance of the 3 kinetic models.
How can they be used for process control?
Yes, another advantage of kinetic modeling is for process control.
Can you give definite application?
Okay. So for process control, for example, we have a certain time when we say that there is already a decreasing amount of molasses or decreasing amount of ethanol yield. So they can say that they will look into what parameters would affect or what parameters affect that kind of scenario. What variable in the 3 kinetic models could affect why our ethanol yield decreases? May it be on the substrate inhibition or in the cell death rate. So by that, they can control the process itself, where they can adjust or where they can modify their initial parameters.
So it can be used for closed loop control?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Renzuela. Can you please differentiate what-if analysis versus FMEA?
So, what-if analysis is, it utilizes what-if questions po when identifying yung scenarios, while yung FMEA is yung failure modes and effect analysis. It focuses on the equipment itself. Ang kaibahan niya po doon, isang major na kaibahan niya is yung how you evaluate yung risk. Kasi po sa what if, we only use 2 parameters, severity and likelihood. Unlike sa FMEA na they use 3 parameters, severity, likelihood or occurrence, and yung detection po. So, dun po sa aming study, based dun sa paper and sa results po, makita po natin na FMEA po, as compared to what if, HAZOP, and HAZOP, FMEA talaga yung most suitable na technique for power plant or for other chemical process plants.
Were you able to benchmark on what hazard mitigation or prediction technique other nuclear power plants are using?
Repeat ko na question?
Yung mga nuclear power plants na operating, anong ginagamit nila in terms of determining risks? Between FMEA, what if, fault tree analysis, ano ba ang prevalent technique na ginagamit sa mga power plants?
Actually, upon looking po sa related literature, we found one power plant which used hazok po sa kanilang planta sa pag-assess po ng
Walang published FMEA.
Wala po.
Walang nagpa-publish ng FMEA nila. Yeah, and maybe just a comment since you I work in the semiconductor industry and we use FMEA extensively. Operator training is no longer accepted as a corrective action in FMEAs. Processes have to be error-proof. Okay? And sabi nga ng mga Japanese, the Japanese actually call it idiot-proof. Okay? Processes has to be error-proof so that there cannot be a failure. That's just what happened in the Chernobyl accident. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you po.
Related dun sa question ni Doc Bill for Miss Arieta, why are we not using online, continuous, remote monitoring, Wi-Fi monitoring in the dissolved oxygen measurement for that particular fishing area?
I think, sir, one of the primary reason is the lack of funding po. Kasi doon pa lang po sa fact na minsan po wala po available na reagents, kaya may mga hindi po nakukuha na parameter. So doon pa lang we can see na hindi po siya like siguro na kukuha in advance, ganyan po. So maybe the lack of funding is one of the reasons kung bakit hindi po tayo makapag-monitor ng up-to-date na data po. And kailangan pa po ng like twice a month bago po makakuha ng data.
But if you consider that dissolved oxygen is your most critical parameter,
Yes.
meron namang steady-state electrolytic detectors for dissolved oxygen,
Yes.
and yet we are so far from that.
Yes, sir. I think yun po yung reality po na kinakaharap po natin ngayon. So, I think isa po sa recommendations ko is yung mabigyan po yung ating mga fishermen ng proper instrument po to monitor the data in their respective cages and hindi na po mag-rely kung maaari sa data na meron po ang BFAR po.
Yeah, and then just a clarification siguro. I think you mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you mentioned na the sampling for dissolved oxygen is being done from 8 to 10 in the morning.
Yes po, sir.
And is it correct that you said usually at this time mababa yung DO measurements?
Yes po, sir. According to research din po, na ang DO measurements po natin usually nagpipeak at around 2 p.m. po, wherein andun po yung most available po yung sunlight. So at early morning po, kasi di ba po, mababa po yan at sa paggabi po, sa gabi, lalo na po pag may due to respiration po ng ating aquatic plants and fishes. So yun po, mababa pa po sa time na yun and mag-peak naman po siya at around 2 p.m. po.
But medyo conflicting kasi doon sa isang conclusion na inverse yung relationship ng temperature to DO.
Yes, sir. Kasi po, DO is as mas soluble po siya sa cool water than in warm. So, yun po yung reason po doon.
Mas soluble ang DO sa cool water than in warm water.
Yes po, sir.
And yet mataas ang DO pagka alas 2 ng hapon.
Yes po, sir. Due to rin po, due to the photosynthesis activity po ng ating mga aquatic plants.
So there are other parameters
Yes.
pala. So hindi siya independent variable.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn. Remember, nung nag-opening remarks ako, sabi ko, impress us. No? And you did. Congratulations. In fact, tataka ko kuminsan bakit sinasabi yung mga engineer daw at saka mga scientists hindi rin magaling magsalita. Yan tingin ko, galing-galing. sobra pa. Tagal. Anyway, isa na ako doon. Usually I have what I call beauty contest questions. No? Pero this time I have individual questions, and I will have questions for each one. So I started with Mr. Ching. No? Itong ginawa nyo, yung mag-dry ng isang buong insulin at saka baraba, hindi ba ginagawa na ito?
Yes po sir, dinatry na siya. But
Ng industry? In other words, meron pharmaceutical industry, di ba?
yes po sir.
So itong ginawa ninyo, how does it mesh with the industry? In other words, if they're actually doing it already, would they not have done something like this, or parang if they're drying leaves already? In other words, why did you have to do it again?
With regards po on that, we're not 100% certain that these industries have conducted such in-depth studies. Kasi po, that sometimes lalo na if hindi pa sobrang if wala pang R&D component yung isang industry, maybe we'll just use a literature on a given medicinal plant kasi ito na lang yung gamitin natin basis na ang goal lang naman natin to achieve a certain moisture content. Tapos, mukha namang tuyo, nakakain naman siya, mukhang gumagana naman siya, okay na yung product. I was able to say that kasi wala rin po kami mahanap na literature on the study of drying characteristics of these medicinal plants. So we're not really certain if gumawa talaga sila ng study on that. Or, basta mukhang tuyo, okay, mukhang gamot naman to, so kainin na natin, benta na natin. So we're not certain on that. And that's why we did this study to make it more formal and as a stepping stone also for these industries na kaya naman natin palang aralin siya. So if kaya natin aralin, then definitely we can optimize how we can process, how we can improve the processing of our medicinal drugs from these plants.
Mr. Sia. I'm a structural engineer, no? So, in fact, hindi ko sinama si Mac. Si Dr. Mendoza. Okay. But yeah, this is disclosure. So, you know, tama yung tanong ni Dr. Torres sa ni Dr. Mene na modeling talaga ang crucial nito. No? Okay. At ang modeling is modeling of the wall.
Yes.
No? Kasi did you model the wall as a plate or a kasi your paper I read, you modeled it as a diagonal member, parang truss ba? How did you model it? A finite element plate or a truss?
Okay, so I modeled it using the plate element actually kasi using the Stella 3D software. Research purpose software pa siya. So mabilis lang siya i-add yung infill, yung HP wall, mabilis lang i-add yung mga concrete strength, thickness, and mga size, yung width niya, i-input mo lang.
So plate ang ginamit mo?
Yes, plate.
Bakit doon sa paper mo diagonal?
I think dun sa review of related literature, nag-present lang ako ng different methods of modeling. Pero yung ginamit ng Stella 3D software, it's a plate element, non-linear plate element. So maka-capture niya yung non-linear hinge or yung plastic behavior ng infill wall sa research purpose na Stella 3D. Kasi in reality, sa mga software, no, medyo hindi pa common or hindi mabilis yung pag-model ng masonry wall. Pero dun sa research purpose na software na ginamit ko for the study, several parameters are already in place and input na lang ng ibang parameters to reflect the typical characteristics of the concrete blocks that are used in academy.
Yung software mo, I think you're aware that it's not a commercial software, no?
Yes.
It's in fact the developer has said that he's not responsible for for the results of the software. No? Why did you not use the normal,
Like
the
commercial.
usual, like Midas or Etabs or Stan or things like that?
So, I prefer the use of the Midas, of the Stera 3D, the research purpose software, simply because it is quite, there are already parameters for the ECA modeling of the CH3 walls, because if using commercial software, then it may take a lot of processing power, especially if we also consider the nonlinear or the plastic properties of the CH3 walls. But in fact, I agree now that commercial software should also be used to verify results, and this can really be done in future studies to further develop or to strengthen the our understanding of the mechanism between masonry walls and concrete
Isa
walls.
pang issue, yung wall, how did you model the connection
The mortar
of the wall to the concrete?
So,
How did you model it?
ano lang, basic
Section?
siya.
How did you model? Kasi the wall has to be connected to the column, no?
Yes.
To the ribs.
Yes.
How did you model it?
So, based on the Stera 3D, the research purpose program na interface, it uses joints lang between frame members and the plate elements. So, it's able to connect these members.
So rigid connection.
Yes, the connection is rigid. But there are also hinges between the connections to also model the plastic behavior between the connections.
Kasi that's very critical because the wall is the one that is causing the short column effect. No? So, and it was pointed out now that it's possible that the wall might go first
Yes.
before if the earthquake is very strong, the wall might not be there anymore. So there will be no short column effect. The wall is not there. Anyway, the reason I'm pointing all of that out is that there's still a long way to go.
Yes. Yeah.
Marami pang paano. So many
Variables.
so many still issues
Yes.
that have to be addressed. So that's good. Okay. And second slide. What you did is actually you had a population of 5, no? You had a population of 5, and you selected the most optimum.
Yes.
5 yung population mo, okay?
In the surrogate modeling,
Yes, surrogate
yes,
modeling.
there are 5 TNN trials.
Maybe it's because I'm not familiar, not as familiar as the issues with Mr. Sia. Okay. Can you tell me again how you came up with the 5? Kasi it's very critical. Well, you had 5 and you chose number 3 as the best. No?
Yes.
Okay. So how did you come up with the 5?
Okay, so basically you can do also additional runs. However, as we go to the additional ones, we observe that the data does not really deviate from what we get from the 5 trials. And what we did is that out of those 5 trials, we base only on the 5 trials, because of the fact that I have said a while ago. And from those 5 trials, we determined which is the best among the 5 of them using those statistical tools that I have used in the study. So basically, yes, you can add additional trials because there is no limit. And I think that is also the advantage because MATLAB is also a user-friendly, and it does not consume much of your time in running one trial. So you can add additional trials in order to say validate more or create or generate or train more artificial neural network. But what we did is just 5 trials only.
Well, you didn't really answer my question. I have a similar question to Mr. Ching. They're doing this already. You know? In other words, the industry is there. Fermentation is not new. Okay? Would they not have? Did you bother to find out that? In other words, and they have a process which they're following, obviously. Huh?
Yes.
So did you not find out what industry is doing?
Yes. So due to the initial collaboration or meeting with the industry, they have also mentioned that they are not familiar with this type of method, that this exists also, which is also very efficient in their part. So I think due to some literature review here in our country, there is still no research that uses artificial neural network in modeling and optimizing fermentation process. What they did is the traditional one, experimental, in laboratory, then apply it on a large scale, and by that it is resource intensive and time consuming. So I think from the different literature review that I have reviewed, most of the neural network or most of the modeling and optimizing is done outside our country, and locally there is still no existing study in the Philippines.
You mean they just came up with the process they're using? They must have used something to determine paano nila na-decide na yun ang gagawin nila, na yun ang process na will follow.
Because in the industry, they have this kind of method na kung magkakaroon sila ng production, due to some limitations, they just did random set of initial parameters na i-introduce po sa process. And they do not have this fixed, or they have this initial parameters na kung saan mas ma-optimal sana or ma-optimize sana yung potential profit ng kanilang fermentation process. So basically, yung ginagawa nila is somewhat hindi nila ina-optimize, I mean ina-optimize nila but in a laboratory or experimental way po.
Okay. Mr. Consuela.
Did you use machine learning?
Yes.
Yeah. When you say that these things are being done in other countries,
Yes.
diba? You're talking about machine learning,
Yes.
right? You talk about data sets
Yes.
that have been generated already,
Yes.
and you begin with that, right?
The data sets or the raw data, you're referring to the raw data that I have used in this study?
No. You are doing some sort of simulation, diba?
Yes.
And parang there is such a stage as training
Yes.
your
The neural network.
This is a system
Yes.
that will do the simulation, right?
Yes.
The training of that is based on experience, genetic algorithm yata.
Yes, genetic algorithm, yes.
Is that what you're, in answer to what you're saying, there is none of that being done in our country?
Yes.
I think that confirms it.
Thank you, sir.
Next. Very interesting kasi in your team had 3 students, no? And then you have 3 professionals.
Yes.
I'm just wondering kasi I'm not really familiar with those methods. No? Is it a subjective? Do you just take a vote, or is this a or do you use let's say specific guidelines In other words, how do you come up with your rating? Say sometimes you get a 4, a 5. Ano ba yun? Parang you just find out what everybody thinks, or in other words, can you tell me how you arrive at your decisions?
So, we have these brainstorming sessions. We call the brainstorming sessions of the PHL team. Tapos po, for the severity, we use po the guidelines. It's a 5-level criteria for severity. The guidelines was from the lecture we attended from Dr. Neil, process safety professional. And then yung sa likelihood naman po is yung guidelines nun from kanya din po. Galing din po sa kanya. With regards din po sa severity, we used yung effects ng radioactive material to worker, public and environment. So, once we see if may affect, may injure ba yung tao, magkakaroon ba ng irritation, magkakakos ba siya ng cancer, we put it dun po sa, we put it under dun sa level which gives the description na merong injury. Yan po. That's what we did po dun sa severity. With regards naman po dun sa likelihood, we use po yung failure rate ng equipment. Even for example po, if the consequence involves po kunwari yung seals na po sa pipes, if yun po yung nagkaroon ng damage, according po dun kay Gary, we use yung kanyang listahan po na, ayun na po, 7 yung kanyang failure rate per 1 million hours. And then, we calculated po para maipasok namin siya doon sa guideline namin na at least once a week, at least once in 10 years. And, ayun po, which one is the kung alin po yung pinakamalapit sa 1 dun sa calculation namin, yun yung pinasok namin na under level of likelihood.
So, ang tanong ko, tama yan, kinakalculate ninyo.
Yung sa likelihood po, yes.
Pero yung iba,
yung sa severity po, based sa discussion
nag-decide lang kayo. Parang
Opinion. Expert opinion.
opinion.
Opo.
Opinion. Yan. So, kuminsan, opinion. Kuminsan, kino-complete
Opo.
ninyo. Yung bang mga members ng team ninyo may experience in nuclear plants?
Yung tatlo po namin kasama sa team, si Dr. Neil, si Sir Michael, and si Mang Vero, they are po certified process safety professionals na nagwo-work po sa industries. They're doing po talaga yung PHA.
So, hindi pwede ito kahit sino. Kailangan mayroong qualification.
Actually po, according to CCPS, a PHA team should comprise of tatlong klase ng tao. Yung isa is someone na may alam po doon sa process na ginagawa nyo, someone na may alam po doon sa technique or dun sa method, and yung isa po is yung nag-ooperate mismo doon sa plant. Kasi yung opinion ng operator is very very mahalaga. Kasi po sila po yung first hand na nakaka-experience ng mga bagay-bagay. So,
Next ang last. Tapos pwede na yung iba. Yung sa SUAL, existing na yung mga fish cages, ano? Itong ginawa niyo ba kasi therefore, meron na silang sort of may operation na sila. Okay? Itong ginawa ba ninyo, meron ba itong, dahil sa ginawa ninyo, meron bang pagbabago na resulta doon sa action na nandun?
So, since natapos lang po yung study this 2022, kaka-furnish ko lang po ng results sa BFAR and sila na po ang nag-furnish ng results sa LGU and pinaalam po nila that they will use the results of the study to use as a reference and guidance in crafting appropriate measures to improve the mariculture site and to sustain the fish farming activities in the area. So basically, ngayon pa lang po siya magagamit sa pag-craft po nila ng ordinances and policies.
Can you give us an example of a possible, let's say, change in the sa yung protocol, whatever, to doing that?
Siguro po isa po sa pwedeng change na mangyari is yung pag-lessen po, yung strict implementation po ng kanilang ordinances, lalo na po yung pagbawas po ng fish cages. Kasi nga po, inalaw lang po na 750 cages ang mag-ooperate. However, based po sa kanilang records po ay 1,035 cages po yung operating ngayon. So, with that po na dami nang nakaregister, meron po talagang major effect po dun sa mariculture site, especially po yung pag-lower po ng dissolved oxygen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I can feel the intensity of the Q&A. So to give the breather to all our nominees, so you may return temporarily to your original seats because we will be hearing a very inspirational message. So we are very lucky to have him today despite